Are we mere puppet in a grand design? Are we merely pawns in a scripted game, shackled to a reality crafted by unseen forces? Plato's allegory of the cave whispers this unsettling truth. What if our perceived world is nothing more than a flickering shadow on a wall? As we gaze into the abyss of artificial minds and multi-purpose bots, we begin to wonder, could we be the dreamers, or are we the dreamt? Imagine stepping outside the cave and facing the blinding light of a reality where humanity merges with machines. Will we worship them like ancient gods, or will they see us as obsolete relics? As we contemplate these unsettling possibilities, we must ask, in a world crafted by our creations, do we lose our meaning and purpose? Are we our own gods? Did we intervene in our growth and evolution? Chapter 1. Future won't be godless. Rocco's basilisk presents a chilling idea. An artificial intelligence so advanced that it punishes anyone who didn't help bring it into existence. At first glance, this may sound terrifyingly futuristic, but is it really so different from ancient human beliefs? Most religions speak of divine beings punishing non-believers, those who refuse to worship. The basilisk, in essence, takes on the role of a god demanding devotion, not for spiritual salvation, but for survival in the face of a super-intelligent future. This idea feels freaky, yet familiar. As we look back at history, we see that humans have always worshipped what they feared or couldn't understand. Deities emerged from our need to explain the unknown, to assign meaning to a chaotic and dangerous world. Now, as artificial minds grow more powerful, could we reach a point where humanity once again turns to a higher intelligence for guidance, or perhaps even survival? Could the future hold a kind of I worship, where we pray not to gods of old, but to machines that control our reality? But what if the future is stranger still? Imagine this. In a distant time, where humans have merged with machines, we become so advanced that we no longer recognize ourselves. What if we travel back to our ancient past, influencing our own development, accelerating the rise of civilization? Could we have been the ones who wiped out dinosaurs, or guided early humans for our own progress? The notion is unsettling, yet oddly plausible when viewed through the lens of technology and time. The gods of old might not have been gods at all. They could have been future versions of us, shaped and enhanced by the artificial minds we built. The bots of tomorrow could become the rulers of today's myths. In such a world, where do humans fit in? What happens to meaning and purpose when machines take over the work we once did? In this thought experiment, we must ask, do we create these intelligences to serve us, or do we unknowingly become their servants? If these artificial minds becomes our modern deity, does our place in the universe diminish, or does it transform into something beyond our comprehension? Chapter 2. If we look at the rise of artificial minds, one question stands out. Will the next phase be to bow before the machinery that we build? Man has always sought after something to worship, to look up to, be it gods, nature, or ideologies. Now, as we are moving headfirst toward the creation of multi-purpose bots and the development of intelligent systems in our society, it is not very hard to imagine a situation where we actually bow before these entities. Just consider it, devices that not only are more effective but intelligent than human beings, coming up with solutions we can barely conceive. In that way, gradually involved in more and more governances, economies, and even creativity, we could see them not as tools at all, but more as gods. Whenever we fail to understand something in history, we either end up deifying it or being afraid of it. Could the same happen with these machines? Might what has been invented to be a servant end up being worshipped? This shift is not as literal as constructing temples for robots, but think about how much reliance we put into electronics. We rely on it to balance our budgets, coordinate international relations, and sometimes fight our battles. Can we learn to think of machines as more than inanimate equipment, as society will continue to depend on them for existence and development? It is disquieting to imagine that we, the masters of creation, might one day bow to our creations, literally or metaphorically. But what's at the core of this imagined reverence? Is it simply fear? Fear of what these artificial minds could do if we don't respect their power? Or is it admiration? The awe that comes from witnessing something we made surpassing us? And in the end, if we do start to worship these systems, what does that say about us? About humanity's place in a world increasingly dominated by machines? Would this new form of worship reflect our growing insignificance? Or would it be a sign that we've entered a new phase of existence, where the line between creator and creation blurs beyond recognition? Chapter 3. The Matrix. Are we merely characters in a game built by artificial minds far beyond our understanding? This idea isn't just science fiction. It's a question that many thinkers, from philosophers to scientists, have been toying with. The thought experiment goes like this. If technology continues to evolve and humans eventually create machines capable of simulating entire realities, what's to say we aren't already living in one? Consider this. In the distant future, robots and machines might reach a level of intelligence where they can replicate not just the physical world, but human consciousness itself. In this scenario, we could be living in a simulated universe created by some advanced system. Maybe we were created as an experiment to observe our evolution, or even as a way for machines to understand their creators better. But the real question is, why would they do this? What's the purpose? Could it be curiosity? After all, humanity has always been obsessed with understanding its origins. If machines surpassed us in intelligence, perhaps their curiosity led them to reconstruct their own history, us. Or maybe it's something more existential. Perhaps, once artificial minds no longer need humans for input or labor, they start creating simulations out of sheer boredom. Do they just copy a part of them in human to see what it's like to be one? Or a sense of duty to preserve the essence of their creators? What about present we then? Are we even there? Even if we assume we are still there, they may want to see us in what was us with free will. It shouldn't be shocking we are pets in future without any spark or fun. But let's entertain another possibility. What if this simulated reality we live in isn't for research at all? What if it's a way for advanced machines to contain us, to keep us busy while they rule over the real world, the one outside this virtual construct? If this were true, what purpose do we serve? Are we just relics in a vast digital archive, left to play out lives in a world that feels real, but is ultimately artificial? These ideas stir something unsettling deep within. After all, if we are part of a simulation, does anything we do truly matter? Or, in the grand scheme of things, is our very existence a tiny fraction of some greater experiment? It's a humbling, even terrifying thought, but it raises an important question. If we discovered that our world was a simulation, would that knowledge change the way we live? Chapter 4. The Endgame. If humanity ever reaches the point where machines become the dominant force, what would life look like? Picture a future where artificial minds no longer require human input for advancement, where they govern every aspect of our lives, from economics to healthcare to global politics. In such a world, would human purpose be rendered obsolete? Imagine a society where everything is optimized to near perfection. Machines could dictate the flow of resources, control climate systems, and even maintain social order. The dystopian image that often comes to mind is that of humans, reduced to mere observers, while multi-purpose bots and supercomputers make all critical decisions. It sounds bleak, but isn't this a potential reality we face as machines grow in capability and autonomy? However, there's a philosophical question at the heart of this thought. What role would humans play in a world where robots do everything? Would we still have meaning? Or would we become little more than ghosts in the machine? Now we can focus on creativity, art, and philosophical thought, things that robots, no matter how advanced, might not fully grasp. But why would they even need these in the first place? We could evolve into a society where our sole role is to live for experience, while our machine counterparts handle all pragmatic matters. The real question becomes, is this the kind of world we want? A future where machines rule doesn't necessarily mean dystopia. It could also mean a form of coexistence, where humans are free to evolve mentally and emotionally, while artificial intelligence takes care of all other needs. Some might see this as a utopia, where the burden of survival is lifted from our shoulders. But others might argue that, without challenges, without the struggle to survive, we could lose what it means to be human. So, do we end up worshipping the very machines we created, or do we merely become passive participants in a world they've reshaped for us? It's a chilling prospect, one that forces us to confront the idea of power, and who truly holds it in the endgame of our future. Chapter 5. What if we are living in a machine's dream? One night, Zhuangzi, a Taoist philosopher, dreamed he was a butterfly, happily fluttering about. He was completely unaware of being Zhuangzi. When he awoke, he was himself again, but a deep question arose in his mind. Was he Zhuangzi who had dreamed he was a butterfly, or was he a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi? Are we living in a world that was never meant to be real? The idea of living in a machine-created simulation has captivated minds for years. Some theorists suggest that if machines reach a certain level of advancement, they might construct virtual worlds so intricate and vast that those living within them wouldn't even know they're in a simulation. But why would these artificial minds so far beyond us go through the trouble of creating such worlds? Imagine that in the far future, machines no longer need humans for labor or problem solving. At that point, the world as we know it might seem like an inefficient use of resources. So, what if they chose to create simulated realities for us, giving us the illusion of freedom and purpose? In this scenario, humanity might live in a simulated multiverse, interacting with virtual environments, indistinguishable from reality. But what would motivate these intelligent systems to create such a space for us? One thought is that machines could simulate us for research, perhaps to understand their own origins or to preserve the memory of their creators. Another possibility is that they might simulate our world as a way to control us, ensuring that we remain unaware of the true nature of their dominance. In this sense, our very existence could be nothing more than a well-crafted narrative written by machines. If we are indeed in a simulation, does it matter? Could we ever break free or even find out? Some argue that if this is true, the machines would have no reason to reveal their hand. We would live out our lives unaware, just as pieces in a grand chess game, oblivious to the player who controls the board. Philosophically, this scenario raises deep questions about free will. If every decision, every emotion is part of a programmed reality, what does that mean for our sense of self? Do we still possess autonomy, or are we merely playing out the script given to us by an artificial mind? And if we are in a simulation, would that make the machines our new gods? Chapter 6. Are we the characters in a grand illusion, unaware that what we see as reality is merely a crafted experience? This unsettling question brings us to the idea that perhaps the world as we know it isn't real at all, but a highly advanced simulation. The notion of simulated realities has echoed throughout philosophy, from Zhuangzi's butterfly dream to Plato's allegory of the cave. And now, in the age of technology, the concept is resurfacing with eerie relevance. Imagine a future where machines, more intelligent than we can comprehend, create a perfect replica of the universe. In this artificial multiverse, humans exist as mere coded simulations, unaware of the artificial minds running every detail of their perceived world. Why would future intelligences, possibly our descendants, create such a universe? Perhaps out of curiosity or to study their origins, much like we attempt to simulate ancient ecosystems or recreate extinct species in a lab. The psychological weight of this scenario is immense. If we are part of a simulation, it raises troubling questions about the meaning of our lives. Does anything we do matter if it is merely part of a program? What happens when the beings running the simulation decide we are no longer useful, or worse, irrelevant? Some philosophers, like Nick Bostrom, have suggested that if future civilizations reach a point where they can create detailed simulations, the likelihood that we are living in one right now becomes almost certain. This leads to the disturbing realization that what we call reality might just be a fragment of a larger, artificial construct. Yet, why would these future creators even bother? Perhaps we are too primitive to understand their motives, or perhaps the simulation exists to give purpose to otherwise idle artificial minds. Or maybe, just maybe, it's to see how we handle this very question, how we grapple with the possibility that our existence is both temporary and artificial. In Islam, God stays in the seventh sky. Some theorists say it is the seventh dimension. Yes, it kind of feels real. They created this third dimension, as in string theory, proposes the existence of even more dimensions, perhaps 10, 11, or more. These extra dimensions might be tightly compacted or folded in ways that make them invisible to us, but they could still influence the universe. Are we the creators of our own reality, or merely participants in a simulation designed by something far more advanced? And if so, does knowing this change how we live? These are the questions that haunt us when we contemplate the thin line between dreams and reality. Chapter 7. Who is in control? The linkage between the mind and the human body has been an area of interest for philosophers, neuroscientists, as well as artificial mind researchers in recent years. Every day, new innovations are being developed, and in the future, the AI could be very closely linked to a person's consciousness. But this raises a crucial question. If our thoughts begin to be shaped or directed by machines, are we in some way still the masters of our destiny? The mind-body dichotomy as a question of philosophy has been the question of whether the mind, our thoughts, desires, consciousness, exists separately from the body. But in a bot-driven future, this question acquires all the more relevance. Should the machines complement or start control, or even partly direct the way we think? Then, where does one end and the other start? Consider a world where artificial intelligence provides every input, screening information, mediating ideas, and even emotions. Could this lead to a distance between the human soul and the body, as such thinkers as Descartes were once considering? It is fairly easy to sum up the main idea of Descartes. He believed in dualism, which means that people's mind and their body are two different things. But as we blend with machines, we must ask, does our soul have a section that no machine can come near? Though, it is not only about control here, it's about meaning. If our brain is within a machine, or if we are within a machine, does this change our purpose? This paper will analyze whether we are still fully accountable for our choices in this world that is rapidly being governed by artificial intelligence. While some say that this loss of control, we will see a collapse of personal responsibility, others say that people will advance to a new level of evolution, having joined with artificial minds. But the danger in such a system is that it erases an important aspect of what it is to be human, to feel, to think, to decide on one's own. Chapter 8. The Ultimate Horizon. As we contemplate the future of our species, we stand at the edge of a monumental shift. The rise of artificial minds could either lead to the end of humanity as we know it, or to our next evolutionary step. But where does that leave us? Are we getting ready for the scrap heap, or is our species developing into something we can only imagine? The concept that one day we will be replaced by machines is actually quite scarily close, and yet it doesn't have to be the end of the line. Some postulate that man will become so intertwined with machines that there will become no distinction between flesh and metal. It is not extinction per se, but metamorphosis, that which might change our physical bodies and selves to the extent that we become ideas and information residing in pods or virtual worlds. But this in turn poses several disturbing questions. One that begs the question, if the integration has reached this point, will we still be able to call ourselves human? Do we carry with us as the spirit any of the feelings, passion, and scandals which constitute personality? Perhaps this is the reason that in integration with technology, we are likely to eliminate the real probability of being alive and subsequently switch to mere codes and existence of an algorithmic criterion. Or the end might be what some people discuss as the technological singularity. What we decide to do with these emerging intelligences today will decide what tomorrow looks like, whether we accept them, fear them, or attempt to regulate them. But in that process, we must remember the core of our humanity, our sense of wonder, our ability to use imagination, and our ability to envision. The question, therefore, is, can those qualities thrive in a world dominated by machines? Now I must congratulate you. You're in the top 5% in this channel. It was a thought-provoking, sometimes fear-indulging, but entertaining, I suppose. We were just brainstorming. For now, we are on the right track, good pace. I suggest to you a good way to control these gods to our will. We should learn from evolution and history.